If you can be good in front of camera, you can go way ahead of your competitors in the whole field of being
Oh
chosen.
yeah, assessments that go along with it are going to showcase, if this person is real or, a faker being brought on. That's something that I try to teach job seekers too.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Sphere of Success, which looks at challenging adversity in business and how we alchemize that to growth, positivity, resilience, persistence, creativity, and innovation. Notwithstanding the whole fact of AI, I know we've had a few episodes on this, but I think it's really important. I think everybody out there will agree that AI is just affecting so many things within our business. And in fact, actually, today we're going to be talking about how AI is affecting the hiring side of our businesses, how staff, etc., are coming in, and often the whole thing around the fake resumes that AI is producing, and how we make the whole thing from the real to the unreal, so that can help our businesses or destroy it in that case as well. Spend a lot of time on it if it's not right. So today we're talking to Joel Schwan. He is the founder of Schwan Stratosphere, where he helps small and mid-sized businesses define their workforce needs based on their business strategy. This allows him to develop pathways that give them visibility into their talent gaps, reduce regulatory exposure through proper role documentation and succession planning, and create the infrastructure they need to make proactive rather than reactive talent decisions. Joel is passionate about building practical systems that save money and help protect a business's greatest asset, their workforce. Welcome, Joel. It's lovely to have you on the show.
Yeah, Deborah, thanks for having me here.
It's a real pleasure. And just out of interest, because we're going to concentrate on one area of what you do, but let the audience know what is it that you can do to help people and a bit perhaps as to why you got into what you do.
Yeah, so we'll go into my origin story first here as to why I wanted to do what I'm doing right now. And that was because I've always had not the most pleasant experience being onboarded or, being trained at certain companies. And so I found that what we severely lack is that a lot of companies focus on scaling their business first and then their workforce second, when they should be doing it simultaneously. And having a master's in IO psychology, I have a good understanding of how the whole order of the how orgs kind of operate or in good business models. And so I've been putting a lot of that into practice with helping especially small to medium-sized businesses better understand that it's good to start scaling your workforce with your business versus as a afterthought. And that kind of comes down to a lot of planning, which HR does for like larger size companies, but in smaller size, it's a bit more difficult to understand exactly how to plan or what they should be anticipating, what type of analysis they should be doing, especially when it comes to their workers and the type of job titles they're using. And also, the other part of my business is helping people write their resumes better because I see both sides of the spectrum. I see what job seekers are going through, the ghosting that are happening from recruiters nowadays, especially with all the layoffs happening. The market is incredibly packed. And so I kind of help and give them guidance is not just helping them with the resume, but understanding how to write it and why they're writing certain things. Which also applies to my work is working with the employers when trying to figure out what type of talent they actually need and how to look for that.
That is so important. In this day of AI, right, you've mentioned employers ghosting the people that have taken the trouble to actually put their resumes forward. And to be honest with you, whenever I've been looking for jobs, it's a job in itself. It's not easy, especially if you're in a role already, to actually go through that whole process of finding another job.
Mhm.
With AI now, why aren't employers putting in the benefits of AI to at least respond to the people that have had the courtesy of actually applying for the role?
There are some that are actually implementing AI now, but there's a lot that kind of goes into it. Um, so for example, a lot of businesses are actually putting like a resume scoring for their AI in their for the recruiters to kind of like review the resumes when they're looking trying to fill a role. Now, a lot of recruiters in the US are kind of iffy about the AI scoring and what kind of goes into it, which is actually quite a bit of stuff. Because a lot of people ask like, how do I beat the ATS system? And the real question they should be asking is, what goes into the AI scoring? Um, and a lot of people just assume it's like buzzwords. And so, there's a little bit of miscommunication between what the employers are trying to do with their AI and what they're using it for, and then like the job seekers that are searching and trying to apply, because they assume that it's all based on keywords and it's actually not. It's actually so when businesses are using AI to like score resumes in during the job search, this is not on all ATS tools, but the ATS tools that do have this feature built into them rely on like offer acceptance or offer acceptance rates, early turnover, interview feedback. If they're using like a learning model, a lot of that kind of goes into training the AI as to how to score the resumes. Now, there's no auto reject feature. Because they still want to have humans kind of like look over everything. So if you think about it, when you're applying for a job, it's actually going into a filing cabinet. Now, the filing cabinet has gotten a little bit more advanced over the time, and now it kind of ranks things as to like what's considered the best match for this job. Um, but the recruiters can still look at their score, look at the score that the AI gave, and they can either, go by it or disregard it. And in some cases, they can actually put in their own score um, as to how well this resume matches up. So there's a lot of nuances involved in that. I think employers still need to better understand the intent when they're putting in AI, because a lot of them just are assuming that they need AI to stream their processes. And in the regards of like in the realm of resumes, it's kind of good to have like a ranking system to make it easier for recruiters to review. But at the same time, AI was also kind of given to the general public as well to use to build resumes. And so now we kind of got a big trade-off because everyone suddenly got a copywriter overnight, right? And so, a person can now paste a copy of the job description into ChatGPT and generate a perfect resume. So that kind of like throws off the whole ranking system that I've been talking about here. Um, and but no, it doesn't. The thing is that like ChatGPT kind of goes by keywords, whereas a lot of these language models are going by not keywords and completely different contexts. It's like from the past history of their hires and resumes based off of that and how long they've stayed, like I mentioned. So it's kind of like two different things being thrown at each other, and it's like, okay, which is which? Is this are these keywords that are being put in this resume like coherent? Do they make sense? And that's what the language AIs and the application tracking systems are doing, is like they're trying to figure out if the keywords that you're throwing in there make sense to the job based on what they were trained on, or if you're just kind of like making things up.
Yeah, so it's congruent, it's cohesive, it actually sort of sticks together. But let's look at the whole idea now. This is all about fake resumes.
Mhm.
Um, Take us through that, because what is a fake resume?
A fake resume is pretty much what it sounds like. It's fake. It's so there are two different parts to that. Let's talk about first the job seeker that is making stuff up. They will put their stuff into ChatGPT, and they may be doing this unintentionally too, because from what I've heard from a lot of recruiters is that people just kind of copy and paste from ChatGPT directly into um, their resume, and then that they just leave it at that. And
So
unfortunately,
there'll be a number of people that have got exactly the same stuff in their
that
resume.
has been the biggest complaint that I've seen everywhere is that all resumes are looking the same, and so now recruiters are kind of if you follow some big ones on LinkedIn, there's some good ones that give some good advice. I highly recommend Amy Miller. She's a really good one, recruiter from Amazon. But for those of you that are unfamiliar with it, the thing is that yeah, if you just copy and paste from ChatGPT into your resume, it's you're just going to look like everyone else because that's the general thing of ChatGPT. Most people just use the free version. Um, and there are some good there are some good GPTs out there that I do recommend checking out. But getting back to the full fake part of it is that you when you copy and paste it into your resume and you don't double check things, ChatGPT has a tendency to make things up. And because people just kind of give general descriptions as to what they want, like help me revise my resume to make me sound better, or revise my resume to match this job description. And so what it will do is it will take all the stuff from the job description that you just shared and kind of make things up into your resume if you're not paying attention. So one, if you're working with a ChatGPT, you want to be as give it as many instructions as possible as to what it should be doing, what it should not be doing. I always ask it to please do not make up metrics, and always say please too.
Yeah, well,
Don't make
yeah,
up.
because I think that's
Yeah,
important. Yeah, please and thank you.
please
Absolutely.
and thank you. It's just courteous, right? So,
Absolutely.
but
I go, no, I totally agree with you. People will go, what? But actually, that's your tone. That's what it's going to pick up on.
yeah, it definitely is what you're feeding it is what it's going to learn. So definitely make sure you're asking it not to like create metrics that aren't already there because it will do that. Because that's what it's trained on. It's trained to know that that metrics matter more than anything else. And sometimes in some cases people don't know their metrics. And if you're suddenly saying like, "Oh, yeah, I got a what is it? 90% success rate with client with the customers, customer satisfaction, right? Well, when you go to an interview, they're going to ask you how you did that.
They're going to ask
So
you to prove it, aren't
yeah,
they?
they're going to ask you to prove it, and that's if you can't answer that in a very I guess right away or be able in a structured way, that they understand, then you're just kind of making yourself look silly
You've always got to have
because
something that backs up the numbers or your claims. Absolutely.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the numbers are what's to make you look good, but you also need to back that up with your methodology and how you did that. I always recommend though when you're ask it to refine the outcomes because that's something that ChatGPT it relies on the metrics too much on. You want to ask it to do refine it for outcomes without making up metrics, and that usually gives you a better result. But yeah, if you're just copying and pasting into your resume, it looks too honestly, it'd be fake. Because now it's just making stuff up. If you don't double check it, you know, they're gonna catch you in a lie. And unfortunately, there are some people out there. I surf around on Threads and X sometimes, and seeing what other people's advice is out there. And the general public tends to say, "Oh, make up stuff." Don't do that. You will get caught. Um, and so that's another thing too.
Always make
Um,
sure as well that it's referenced the right things because otherwise
yeah,
it looks stupid. Yeah.
Yeah, you need to reference the right things. And if you don't have the job experience in this specific tool that they're asking for, you probably have worked in other similar tools. And that's something I do recommend kind of stating out is that for example, I work with application tracking systems and vendor management tools. So for the vendor management tools, it's like, I may work in Beeline, but I may not understand what Fieldglass is all about. And those are two very different VMS type systems. And so, but I know what is expected in the workflows and how to engage with the hiring managers. And so that would be something that I would explain my outcomes for. I use this tool to do exactly what you're already doing with that tool type of thing.
Absolutely. So that you can see some kind of cross-fertilization going on to say, well, look, I learned
Yeah.
this, so it's not going to be too difficult for me to learn that and put it into
Yeah.
practice. Yeah.
And some of the things that AI is kind of contributing a problem to right now is also like recruiters. So third party recruiters kind of get put under a lot of pressure too. And so sometimes they'll create fake resumes to kind of like boost their numbers. Now, this is a very frowned upon practice in the staffing industry and
So
is in high.
go back on that. So third
Sure.
party, what you're saying?
Okay, so third party recruiters are we sometimes called suppliers or vendors, staffing firms that or
Recruitment
staffing
agencies,
agencies.
that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, the staffing agencies, are most known for bringing on contractors, trying to fill those roles for their client companies. They do permanent roles too, direct to hires. It really just depends on the type of role that the client's asking for. But because there's so many of them out there, they're competing with each other. Like Microsoft and Google, for example, have like hundreds of staffing agencies that work for them.
Well, they'd have to
Uh,
because the numbers of people that they want.
yeah,
Yeah.
and so, yeah, they have a bunch of roles to fill, and they need a bunch of people to do, or a bunch of businesses to do that for them and look for the right talent, right? Well, sometimes these staffing firms, to make themselves look better, will just create a fake profile altogether and throw that into they'll submit those, like they're real people, knowing full well that they probably won't, get hired. But the problem is like if they do get selected, that kind of like throws um
Well, the
a
natural
big
thing is, oh,
wrench.
I'm sorry, but they found employment elsewhere, or they withdrawn
Yeah, it's
from the
like, oh, I'm sorry, they're
application.
not real.
They withdrawn from
Or
the application. They're not interested anymore. Yeah.
yeah, it's like, what excuse can I come up with here and spin the wheel? So it's but that is a thing that's been happening, and that's kind of where a lot of companies now are trying to figure out ways like, okay, how do I identify the fake resumes? And that's kind of being contributed into the learning modules now for like the AI ranking system or the resume ranking systems with AI in those tools to kind of like help identify is like, is this too good to be true, or is this more of like a fake candidate? And so, it's a bit of a mess right now in what we're seeing, but they're still both the staffing profession in general does a really good job in trying to figure this out. And they always come up with newer ways of doing things. Right now, skill base has become very popular in combating fake resumes in that, but at the same time, it's like a lot of people don't want to take a test again. And that's kind of what skill-based hiring is about, is that you sometimes you have to either do like a video interview of yourself and they'll share that, or they'll have you taken like an assessment to see if you know the skills that you're talking about. And unfortunately, a lot of job seekers are turned off by the assessment part. I personally don't want to take another test for every job I have to apply for, but if the staffing firm will do it for me and submit that same test to everyone else, that kind of helps out too.
You see, this is very interesting. This is why I'm telling people who want to go for jobs as opposed to being self-employed or having their own businesses, is I teach and train in the art of podcasting and video and how to be a great
Hmm.
guest. And a lot of people, because it's something which they think, oh, I won't need that. If you can be good in front of camera, you can go way ahead of your competitors in the whole field of being chosen.
Oh yeah.
Because if you can be good in front of camera, you can go way ahead of your competitors in the whole field of being chosen
Oh yeah.
because they want people to be able to, let's think about this, Zoom meetings or meetings in front of clients or doing a pitch as a presentation. I mean, all of this time, if you can be good in front of an audience, whether that be face to face or on video, and it's kind of like the more familiar you are with video, the more likely you're going to be okay face to face. It's just a slight difference and nuance. And this is what
Hmm.
I teach and train with people is to say, yeah, you start off at ground zero, that's fine. But ultimately, if you can then shine above your competitors on video, coming across
Hmm.
as authentic and understanding of the questions that you've been asked and pitch to the time frame that people have asked you to give your video in, because the number of people that tell me I press record and then have to stop, press record again, stop, press record again, stop, and the lighting is bad, and the everything is kind of grainy, and the sound quality isn't great. And so, what I'm trying to help people is that if you perfect the art of the video side of things, I think it was Stephen Bartlett, so well known across into the States as well as the UK, etc. Entrepreneur. He was on Dragon's Den, our version
Hmm.
here in the UK. He's got a podcast called The Diary of a CEO. And the last thing I think he was mentioning is that he hired his recent marketing director, I believe, because of the power of the video that they sent through. And this is the whole thing. If you're going to combat fakes, fake stuff, and okay,
Hmm.
you can create an avatar of yourself, but it's going to be difficult in the sense of what you want them to talk about in regards to this interview that you want to have with so and so because of this job application you're going for. If you're eloquent in front of the camera, you're a safe pair of hands. People know they can trust you in a leadership role, in a role where you know perhaps that you're going to be client facing, in a role where you've got to influence others. And let's face it, who doesn't have to influence others in their role at some point,
Hmm.
irrespective of your hierarchy in the organization? I'd like you to go into that a little bit more detail as to how people are looking maybe at video elements of what they do to combat this whole thing with fake resumes, or the fact that, the chat GPT is plagiarizing everything else and they all look the same.
Yeah, so I haven't heard too much about the video thing being a problem yet, but I mean, and that is a good point that, there are deep dives. I think with videos though, that there are still a lot of like tall tale signs that, a video is fake. Especially when it comes to like talking and trying to like go over the resume itself and explain your job details. Um, I mean, of course, as the technology advances, that's going to be a pain point that we are going to have to address at some point because videos only will get better. Um, and we will be able to like replicate like a conversation like this, pretty easily. But I think we're a little far away from that yet. So right now, it's like staffing firms in general like want to make sure that they have a good reputation, at least the good ones do. Like I said, there are some that create like the fake resumes, but creating a fake resume is super easy, and it's more to like the recruiter trying to make themselves look better versus like the whole of the staffing firm itself. And so I do approve of like the video things for the skill assessment, even though a lot of job seekers are kind of turned off by it because no one wants to talk into a camera. A lot of people want to have like an actual one-on-one with a hiring manager like right away. But because of all the technology advancements, video interviews are going to be the best way to go. And again, the skill assessments that go along with it are going to showcase, if this person is real or, a faker being brought on. And that kind of goes into like what's, small to medium sized businesses can kind of like how they can see the red flags of that.
Mm,
And so and usually if a person's talking in video, sometimes they're just going to repeat the resume and they don't really know how to talk about themselves very well. So I think that's also going to be a similar problem. But things that the business themselves can look at are like, does every bullet point they're referencing sound like it's coming from like a corporate brochure? Um, if they sound too good to be true, they probably are, or they, don't understand their own strengths. And that's something that I try to teach job seekers too, is like, they're very turned off by some of these basic questions, like, tell me about yourself. Well, when you're telling about yourself, you want to sell yourself, not just talk about yourself, because they don't really care about the long, in general, hiring managers don't care about the long history that you've been through. They see in your resume. What they want to know is what you learned from that experience and what value you're going to bring to them, to their team. Because, they assume that you probably know how to do the job already. But how have you done it at other companies? What has been your approach? How well and how much value have you brought to that? So I think, I tell clients, if you can't see the story when you're explaining it either on your resume or in your video, then it's probably going to be seen as fake by the employer. And that's something the employers can kind of take too, is like you got to see the growth that they're doing, like the accomplishments. But if the accomplishments look too good to be true, it probably are, So that's
yeah.
kind of a roundabout way of answering that question there.
No, no, I like the fact as well. You've mentioned something which I really advocate as well, and I teach and train in this is how you get a good story,
Yeah.
how you actually
Storytelling is becoming
know,
very
because it's in your
popular.
head and you've lived it. and
Yeah.
you come along with that story, as long as you know the process of that story and the beginning, the middle, and the end, and what constitutes that story. I always say have a store cupboard of stories because you need to pull out each story to make it resonant with the person that you're speaking with in any regard. But the most celebrated raconteurs, the people that speak for a living, they talk in terms of stories most often. And so
Hmm.
in that storyline, people are captivated by that story. And then it turns away from the features, which people think, oh my goodness me, no, not another fact. It's you want to give this story. That I think that's excellent. And if that can show in your resume, I think, from that perspective as well, so that everything is congruent with the story, that's got to
Hmm.
be a very powerful way of presenting yourself so that you can talk about that. And it should form a storyboard of, I believe, of what your life and career has been to date,
Yeah.
to actually do that. And when you're thinking about these red flags, as you said, if it looking at like it's a corporate brochure, that's not necessarily telling a story, is it? It's not really giving the human element into it. So, what can
Right.
you give advice? So, what are the key things that small and medium-sized businesses should be looking out for as red flags, as you say? If you could give us sort of like the top three or the top five.
Yeah, I guess the biggest thing is making sure that the resume shows growth on that thing. Because you're gonna see I guess a growing pattern from when they first began. Now, you'll see them, for example, go from like a coordinator to a specialist to a manager or director, right? Now, if their background's a bit heavy, a bit long, like they're in the industry for like 25 years, you may not see them in their like beginning part because a lot of them are told that they only need to have like 2 pages, or in some cases 1 page, which by the way, recruiters don't care how long your resume is. Um,
But that's
but
interesting. Let's just stop there. I think that's a really good point. Everybody says no more than 2 pages here in the UK, and you've just kind of blown that out of the water by saying people, recruiters don't care how long your resume is. Just go into that a little bit more detail if you wouldn't mind.
Okay, well, let me clarify. Good recruiters don't care how long your resume is. There are some out there, and I've seen some recruiters, throw their own opinions into the pot on LinkedIn about, oh, you should have it no more than two, or definitely have like a one pager. And, you know, to be honest, recruiting is a very subjective or hiring in general is a very subjective practice. Like everyone's different, every culture is different. What works at one company may not work at another. And it all comes down to like, recruiters more care about like the requirements that are on your resume. So showing that how you're growing in from one position to another, how you've applied the practices and the methodologies that you've done, really are what they're kind of looking at. Hiring managers look at the growth too, but they're more driven by their own biases. And so, some might think that a red flag might be that they're skipping around in this with the gaps in their employment when they may just be looking to grow from one company from another, having maybe spent only 2 or 3 years at one company and then only spending like a couple months on another, but there are a bunch of reasons that go into that too. I mean, especially nowadays with all the layoffs happening, is that, there's everyone's going to have gaps in their resumes now. It's like almost a guarantee. So it's, things like that companies need to kind of look at and teach their team leaders that are looking to onboard and bring on more people, that you got to understand that there's stuff that's happening in the real world now that are affecting everyone. And one of the red flags is like, if the resume just kind of like looks like they've done everything at every role and they're awesome superstars, it's probably not, they may not do well at the actual job sometimes. So, other things to kind of look at too is that making sure that they what they're writing in the resume makes sense. Like context is like the biggest thing. So they may say like they may the resume may not be overabundance of awesomeness, but there may be certain points that don't make sense, like using one methodology for an outcome that you don't typically use for, or a tool that you don't use to create this outcome type of thing. Um, those are kind of like red flags to kind of look at, being like the context of the resume, because that's something GPT can't really replicate very well, is the context as to how you achieved, what you did at your job. Um, and so now I recommend to hiring managers and recruiters both to kind of look at, if you understand what the job is all about, then you should be able to understand if these bullet points make sense. And if they don't, then the person probably is not going to be a good fit, or even worth talking to, because now they're just making stuff up.
So interestingly, then, from what you're saying, you're going to think about these red flags. You're going to see if there's continuity. There's going to see if there's growth. You're going to see if
Mhm.
the methodologies all match up, etc. You're going to see how somebody's done something and how they've moved into the different roles that they have and made things
Mhm.
happen. When you're actually coming down to it with fake resumes, etc., with that, how does this then measure into the bottom line? What is happening in businesses with the time wasting and the people then that aren't right for the role getting the jobs and then leaving and what have you? What would you say figure wise, if you know them? What would people be seeing as a direct impact to that on their bottom line?
I don't have a specific figure, but I can tell you it'll be expensive.
Mm,
In fact, the thing is, like, it costs the company a lot of money to both onboard someone, and when they let them go, to re-onboard someone else. Because now they have to refill a role after like a short period of time, because they don't know how long a person is going to stay with them. They're always hoping it'll be lifetime, but I think being able to make plans for that, succession planning as to what would happen if this person leaves. Will this really hurt the team, or are we able to distribute the workload accordingly? And I think that's where workforce planning comes in the very beginning part of the business, is understanding is like, these are the roles that we have. How do we have a plan if things happen? Do we have initiatives in place to train and teach people that, so they don't want to leave us all the time? And, resources available for them, or even to help them, really. It's something I actually recommend to businesses, kind of like understand a better way of like helping your employees grow, and develop. And so, don't be afraid if they end up, leaving, but I think being able to have a plan in place to build the initiatives, to build out the layout of your company, and having succession plans in place for when people do leave, who's going to take over for them, and then being able to find someone quickly and streamline that process, to onboard, to take their place. So I think those are all going to really help them out with their bottom line.
And would you say, I mean, it's obviously it's like a bit like how long is a piece of string, but when somebody does leave and they want to replace them,
Mhm.
would there be an average, let's say, for instance, middle management, and knowing that you've got an influx of CVs coming through and then you've got the whole hiring process. How long does that whole thing usually take from start to finish?
Depends on company to company, but usually it can take a couple weeks. If maybe 3 weeks at the most, to get someone all set up and ready to go after interviewing them, and making them a job offer, and them accepting the job offer, and then finding the time when they can start. That would be ideal for the team, so they're not overly burdened with trying to teach them the layout of the culture and all that, to get them up and going. So it usually can take anywhere between like 2 to 3 weeks. In some cases, I've seen 4. It just depends, but there are ways to streamline that process even better. And then again, that's kind of where someone like me comes in to kind of help out with their workforce processes. Is like, are you making this more complicated than it needs to be? And I always recommend, simplifying things as much as you can, because there's a lot of small, medium-sized businesses don't really have like a whole lot of tools at their disposals. Typically, they just have like one tool for like payroll and that. So when you're looking to onboard someone, you want to keep things simple compared to like larger size companies, and being able to first have a structured interview process. This will reduce the time drastically, from trying to find someone to hiring them to onboarding them, because it can take like 4 weeks altogether by itself, just by doing interviews, if you're not satisfied with the candidates being delivered to you, and you're
And
doing this
then
all by
you,
yourself.
sorry to jump in while I remember
Sure.
this, is the fact that you've got then they've got to put their notice in, and depending upon how many weeks or months sometimes these people have to be able to be released from their current roles,
Yeah.
then you've got that to add into the mix as well.
Yeah. Oh yeah. People almost everyone has like a 2 week no, the rule is to give 2 weeks notice. Now, well, it's a
Well,
courtesy,
that's
not a
what it
rule,
might be in
but
the States. In the UK, I think you can. I think you've got to give them. You hand in your notice, but then it's usually like they have you for another month before they release you to go to your next role.
yeah, and in the US it's there's no written rule or legal there's nothing legal about not having to give a 2 weeks notice, but it is a courtesy and it is considered very rude to just up and leave. So most people want to leave on good terms. So in
Yeah.
case something happens, they can go back. It's pretty much a lot of that's in the different parts of the world too, but it's no one won't really want unless they really dislike that person they work for, they're gonna want to stick it out at least for 2 weeks. And that's something, yeah, a lot of employers should just automatically assume is that, yeah, this person's got at least 2 weeks to give it put in if they're currently working somewhere. Um, and then, so they got that's where it kind of comes really important to make structure that interview process. And there's a couple ways to do that. What I highly recommend for a lot of companies is have one the hiring manager be the first person to interview the person besides the recruiter that screened them. Because all the recruiter's doing is making sure they meet the qualifications to pass them on. So if the hiring manager looks at it, then they're the ones doing the initial interview. After that should be maybe one other person, either the hiring manager's manager or someone else on the team to kind of like give second input. And that's really all you need. Maybe three at the most, right there. Two if you're not using if the hiring manager is sourcing on themselves and trying to find someone. So if you go into like maybe four and five additional people to look at interview this person, then you're just dragging out a process. You don't need the whole team to interview someone. And I think that's where a lot of hiring kind of gets backed up and bottlenecked is that because they need to have everyone's input from the team. And it's like, okay, there's a difference between team culture and working together well and a team culture and everyone having to find this person to be a good fit. And really only two people need to really understand that the probably the best person on your team that does the work that the person is going to be doing and yourself as the team leader or manager or whatever. Those are really the primary people that should be making the final decision for the hiring.
Mm. Yeah, I think it's important to get that streamlined because if you don't, then
Hmm.
the consensus is very difficult to then try and get because the more people in the mix, the more individual nuances come about. And so ultimately, it's very difficult then to come to a consensus as to which person is the right one. And then from the sake of drawing this right the way back from the whole thing about no fakeness in the CV. Yeah,
Yeah.
you can get the whole wording and everything looking great with AI and in that case. But
Hmm.
with that in mind, if you were looking at somebody then saying there's an SMB leader, they're looking to hire, what would you say would be your checklist of choice to make sure this whole process was something which was effective, fast, does the job, and that the person that they get at the end, or the people that they get in the end, depending on how many they're hiring, is going to be right for the role. So, what would be your checklist that you could give them?
Yeah, I mean, it would be very dependent on like the industry and the type of job that they're doing, but in like maybe like the first like five for the checklist would be, making sure one, everything sounds correctly. There's not like an overabundance of metrics. That uh if they're listing like the correct like skill or technical skills that they have on their resume. Um and being able to have, I guess, a conversation with them. If they sound good and they sound like they know what they're talking about on their resume, it'd be good to kind of bring them in for a conversation. Um, and then see if they're real in that case, because you only tell so much by the paper. And then Sometimes there's in some cases like engineering, they may want to ask them to do like a quick little assessment. I'm not opposed to like take home tests to do as long as they can be done within 10 minutes at the most, really. Um, Now, the longer that takes, some people are more inclined to give them a longer test that can be more dragged out. And if they exceed like 30 minutes, then you're running the risk of having to pay the candidate further time. So you want to make sure that, if you're giving a test out, keep it kind of short. Um, but those are kind of like the big things I look for is like make sure that, the context, what they're saying in the resume makes sense, what they're not using like an overabundance of metrics. And if they do list metrics, are they able to like explain those metrics logically to you that makes sense? Um, and of course, the dates too. Something that's kind of pretty important is like make sure the dates line up. It seems like very simple and silly to kind of think about, but it's like ChatGPT, if they're making up a resume, you'll see like they're almost flawless in their dates. Like I worked here, okay, now I worked here at this specific time. Most resumes aren't going to be that well precise. You will see a gap here and there in some cases. So it's kind of good to kind of see it's like, is this too perfect or not? And that's something else I would look on the checklist too. So
Yeah. And for anybody doing it, take out the M dashes.
M
Because
dashes,
that's
yeah, I
going to
would.
be a giveaway.
Yeah, M dashes are a pretty big giveaway. I think people are catching on to that now. But I also like to say it's like sometimes there are some people that are very grammatically correct and like put in the M dash in the correct way. So
Well, I've done that before, but without ChatGPT. But at the end of the day,
yeah,
you kind of know with it that it's just a comma rather than an M dash.
yeah, just use a
I'll be
comma or
fine.
sometimes better put things in parentheses. But yeah, I mean, M dashes are another big giveaway on resumes too.
Yeah, absolutely. It's interesting. So, from your perspective, then, both small to medium-sized businesses and also the people who are looking to get roles within those organizations, they're the people that can be in touch with you to actually find out from both camps how to actually really optimize their experience. I'd be right in saying that, wouldn't I?
Yes. Yeah,
Yeah.
I can help job seekers better understand the correct language they should be using and how to showcase that on their resume better to catch their recruiter attention and to keep hiring managers' interest. Because I, have worked with quite a few of them over the years at various places. Um, and for the employers themselves, like I mentioned, untangling like complex uh, processes is kind of where I come in. And a lot of the times it's like they haven't done a very good job on their planning, so they may need someone to help with coming up with maybe a better model that will help them do better with finding people and maintaining them, or even just structured interviewing, like I mentioned. And some people are uncomfortable with doing the like no more than three interviews type of thing too. If they want to have additional people to do it, I would recommend like a panel interview for that. Um, and there's again ways I could help them understand how to do that, how that can be scheduled. Um, I think that's one of the greatest fears too, is like panel interviewing. Everyone's so busy doing everything else.
How are you going to get
Uh,
all those diaries to align?
I'll help
That's
them figure
a
out the best
logistical
ways. There are
nightmare.
yeah, there are good practices on how to do that. They just have to be open to uh, accommodating. So,
Yeah, absolutely. And just lastly, with remote working, now,
mhm.
by and large, here to stay in a number of organizations, etc. How can people make sure that people are going to thrive when they're not in the office and when they are in the office? Because there's two different, there's two different states there. So just guide
Yeah,
us through that.
I definitely recommend businesses going back to what we were seeing in the pandemic and really jumping on remote work. Um, One, because it opens up your talent pool so much. Like, a lot of them are pretty much afraid that collaboration is going to like degrade when actual research has explained the exact opposite. That people have done way better working remotely than they have done in the office, being more productive, and to main how you can follow those metrics again depends on industry and what the jobs entail. But you can. look at their outcomes, like their performance. I mean, you're going to be doing a performance evaluation on them, at certain points, either quarterly or yearly, or just at the mid section. Look at those outcomes. Like, are they doing their job? Are they doing well? And are you more concerned about that, or are you more concerned about them just being online all the time? Because I think that's a big distinction that a lot of companies need to understand too. Is like it's not, even if they're like look like they're not online a lot, but they're doing their job. Clearly, they're being productive. They're just being productive on their own time, versus having to be on the clock like 9 to 5 with a green little light there. And I guess if a business is really insecure about themselves, they could like monitor them to see how often they pop offline and monitor performance that way. I don't recommend it. I think everyone should be focusing more on the outputs. And, I think that will one, it'll showcase like how well your business is really doing. So you're not just letting good people go because they're not meeting your cookie cutter standard. Um, and also, it's like there are people that are disabled too that, are just as good at working at anything else. So having like remote opportunities
Yeah.
definitely helps them out in the long run of things. And you're also not pushing off costs to accommodate people that might need additional needs inside of the office. Um, and I only say that because, like, just, people that are physically disabled require a lot of different accommodations, which can cost the business money if they have to be there in person. But also, there's neurodivergent people
Yeah.
that don't do well and may need additional help and assistance too, in the office. They do better remotely. And so not only are you saving your business money, but you're also going to be helping out the job seekers out there too that can do the job but just needs a little extra assistance. And a lot of that can all be done from home. So
I love that. Yes, it's much more inclusive, isn't it? I think that's great. That's something which I hold dear as well, is that those people that might not be thriving in an office condition for whatever reason can actually thrive from a remote working opportunity,
yeah,
and that can be life transformative. So to be given an opportunity that perhaps had been denied them previously
yeah.
because of that.
And I
So
think
yeah.
And I think to do that, they have to kind of like understand the leaders of the business need to understand their own biases about this and look at the research, well, because some may argue and be like, well, research also shows that, people that work remotely don't do well. I was like, well, first off, who's doing that research? One, and two, what are their sources and how did that research done? And maybe this is just the psychologist in me, but it's like how the research is performed matters too. And I think like the argument saying that people, though there's research that combats this research, well, yeah, that's always going to be the case, but how that either of those research were conducted will tell you a lot, because a lot of the stuff that says that remote work does really well with productivity is actually done by a lot of academia groups. So that it's peer reviewed and it's well written and they know what they're doing. So
Wonderful. So, Joel, I think you've opened up a whole area for people to be thinking about fake resumes right the way through remote working and what benefits that can bring to the business. How do people get hold of you?
best way to get a hold of me is my website through www.schwanstratifier.com. I'm sure we'll supply a link for it, but you can also find me on my LinkedIn too. You can just search by Joel Schwan. I'll usually, I think, rank at the top of the appearances there. So
Yeah,
both are good. Both are good ways.
yeah. So I'd just like to say Joel has his logo behind, but for anybody that can't see that, it's Schwan, Schwan, and the company name is Stratosphere, which is Stratif for Foxtrot YR, because that's just a little bit different to perhaps people in the UK have seen. So I think it's a great name. It's just we just got to make sure that people can get that, which is fantastic. And then if you look at the top right-hand corner of his backdrop, it's Schwan Stratosphere.com. I've even got to put my teeth in for that. So yeah, do be in touch with Joel. Joel, it's been great to have you on the show. Thank you for doing a deep dive into that. And I think that if anybody is thinking, am I going to do that? what are you going to lose by having a call with him and just discussing your requirements? Because ultimately, from both the recruiters and the people who want the jobs, the job seekers, I think there can be an excellent opportunity of having your mind put at rest and then seeing if Joel's services is something that you'd like to take on board, which I think would be fabulous to make sure you get the outcomes that you're looking for. So, is there anything that you think, if I'd gotten my golden opportunity, that I'd like now to say that we haven't? Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we close?
I think one thing I would recommend that if you're looking to implement AI into resume scoring, some of the key things that you want to look at are the core skill match of like percentage of must-have skills the candidate possesses, skill proficiency, nice to have skill match, job title and roles familiar similarities, and tenure relevance, being just a few, and historical success fits. These elements are actually very useful for understanding learning models with AI. So, and also AI is only as good as the data you provide it. So make sure that the that you're doing is at least looked at to make sure there's no biases involved, and then it'll help you out in the long run.
Wonderful, Jill. Thank you very much for being on the show, and everybody watching, thank you as well. It's great to have you with us. Please do like, subscribe, and share to this channel, and actually put your comments in for this episode because that really helps to get the numbers up and the people that really need to see this to get it out to more people. So, once again, thank you. Until next time, be successful, and we'll see you all again very soon. Bye bye now.
It's like,